This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, or so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Today's episode is a good one, where I pick the brains of Aaron Walsh, a fellow golfer, a performance coach for the Chiefs Rugby Union team in New Zealand, where we go on to chat about his experiences of supporting elite rugby union players. We discuss common challenges that the players bring to him, perceptions of the field from the players and coaches working on their mental game. We've got performance analysis, which is also touched on, as is culture in elite professional sport. I really hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did recording it. Aaron, would you be able to explain to the listeners a little bit about your background and then your work in the Chiefs and Harlequins?
Yeah, so my background, I've always had a great love for sport, obsessed with it from being a kid. Of course, growing up here in New Zealand, it was the All Blacks or nothing, and so was very, very much immersed in rugby culture. My father was like the convener of junior rugby at my local club. My grandfather was a club president, Celtic Rugby Club. When I grew up, I got told you're not playing any other sport but rugby, and you will play for Celtic. And that's just the way things worked in my family. So large Irish Catholic family. So I've always been surrounded by sport, always loved sport. And I suppose the maturation of that into a career was really around the idea of probably having a question over my own participation in sport, and particularly in something like rugby, where, I suppose when I was younger, I was probably viewed as the kid that had a lot of potential and, could do some things, and then didn't really translate that into anything, I suppose, or not anything that I felt was a representation of my capability. And I remember, being 17, 18, playing first 15 rugby here in New Zealand, and waking up on game day with like stomach aches and, in and out of the loo all the morning, and, just really having no ability to manage it. And then as a result, no enjoyment, like it was something I began to not look forward to rather than really love and embrace. And I suppose from the personal side, and the career side is a whole different discussion, but from the personal side, I suppose, a lot of my work is now around probably those seminal moments where I felt exposed and, just lost in how to navigate through the mental and emotional side of performance. I had no problem with the physical or the technical side. It was the other side, or the other aspect. And, at that point when I grew up, which is, playing, probably as good a rugby as I could have, was in the mid to late 90s, there was nothing. It was not talked about. It was not discussed. It was, I don't even know. Like, it wasn't until in New Zealand, Gilbert Anoka sort of came on in, and, the story of him being smuggled in by Wayne Smith as an assistant masseuse or whatever on a trip, so Canterbury Rugby would sign off on it, when really he was just doing this mental work behind the scenes. And so, I suppose, like all of us, a lot of our experiences shape what we care about the most and what we're most passionate about. And for me, it was really around the idea, and it's still probably to this day what drives me the most, is that we have these amazing athletes who work incredibly hard. And I just think it's an absolute tragedy for them not to be able to actualize that skill and potential, because they don't have an ability to navigate through the emotional and mental side of performance.
No, that's brilliant. Can you just explain how you would go about helping the rugby player there who experienced similar things to yourself in terms of the performance anxiety?
Yeah, I probably would lead back a bit around my philosophy. So I have a really clear philosophy on how I approach the mental side of performance. And, I think part of this is, I didn't go down a clinical route, which is neither here or there, but what I think it enabled me to do is to understand the practical demands first. And then I've gone back since and done some university work, which I found actually surprisingly not difficult, because I think that, and I did it later in life, but also having a lot of experience of being involved with performance psychology, your experiences are so rich. So my philosophy was really formed around, I treat it like a skill rather than a personality trait. And I think some people go, oh, that's obvious, but I don't think it is. So if you treat it like a skill, then you would use all the traditional skill development models, or, so I'm big on it. I suppose I'd start off with a needs analysis. I know that sounds like 101, but, assess the needs, prescribe, some tools or an intervention, and then monitor the progress. And so, I haven't met one rugby player that has the same issue. Like, it may manifest the same, or not one athlete. It may manifest and I get really nervous before games and I want to throw up and I don't look forward to playing. But the origin of that, I don't think is ever the same. It might have some trends around, I have a fear. Like I was talking to a friend the other day. It's like so obvious that, all the anxiety is based in fear, which we should know, right? Like the fear of letting myself down, letting my teammates down, letting my family down. That tends to be where I see the anxiety occur, which is a very external way of, I suppose, dealing with pressure. But it's a very, very easy target. Like, you can think about, okay, what does pressure mean to me? It's the potential that I fail, and then I let myself down, which would be disastrous. I let my teammates down, which would be horrific. And then I would let my friends and family down, and my fans, or the fans of the team. And so it all goes back to this whole idea, which I still think is so critical, is that how do we actually install and generate authentic belief and confidence in people, so they have a counterbalance to the little man that sits on the shoulder who wants to talk about everything that could go wrong.
Yeah, we've all got that chimp. Or...
Yeah. Just has a little yarn, little chat every now and then about, what about this? Have you thought about this? And I suppose, that skill philosophy model approach is a real important part of my work, because if it is just about philosophies and ideas and research, words paint the picture of what is possible related to someone changing their behavior, but it's only actions that change people.
Yeah.
And so I've always been a practitioner first. Does that make sense? Like I'm currently doing some academic work and got some papers up to be reviewed, but I was always, from my own perspective, always felt like I was a practitioner who then stumbled into the theory later. And then I read all these theories and went, oh, that's brilliant. Now it gives confirmation of what I had been observing and seeing, and I suppose in some sense installing in some cases. And now I had a framework to actually give me some confidence around some of that stuff.
When you talk there about skills and traits, the average athlete now, or in general, athletes are seeing it more that way, that actually, like, these are skills that can be developed? Or do you think there's still a large percentage out there who are quite fixed in their views?
I think it's mixed. I think it has a lot to do with coaching, to be honest, because, like, ironically as it is, our coaches will go to great ends and means and resources and planning to develop one's physical and technical skills, and yet they ignore this large area, maybe under the presumption. Like, when I talk to people, honestly, I'm doing a research, just finished a research project that's now getting reviewed, and it's around why hasn't mental skills been integrated into elite teams, and that's the subject that I've looked at, and it really goes back to a simple question: people don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. That's the big answer. People don't know what to do, and something that is unknown then has a limited predictability around its impact. So therefore, it's easier just to leave it alone.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, it is a difficult thing to measure, isn't it? That's one thing in sports science, being so big now. I can imagine that's factored in.
And I think you've got to be able to measure it, the impact of your work. I think all of us should. How we measure it's going to be really important. So like, I know for the work I do, I have 3 areas that, I've agreed with the teams that I work in that I'd be judged over, or that I would be reviewed over, if you want to use that term. And that's around the idea of, did I provide the knowledge, tools, and support to help these athletes reach their capability as it relates to my area of expertise? Not outcome-based, but, obviously, as you know, if those 3 things happen, they perform better.
Yeah. In terms of how that's assessed, then what is it through, like a survey monkey, that type of thing?
A little bit, but like, there's practical ways that you can do it. I think this is where, and I don't try and be critical about it, but I think there's not a hell of a lot of creativity in the sports psych world at times. I think we sort of just go to these like models and things that we know well rather than going, well, let's think outside of the box. So I'll give you an example. One thing I'll do with, a large percentage of our players is that I'll get their clips from the analyst. Then I ask them to go through every time they make a play, whether it's a pass, a kick, or, and I ask them to have two boxes. So one's called decision making, one's called skill execution. And they just mark a red or a green. So by the end of that, like that's a lot of data, right? So you get to the end of 5 or 6 matches, you can actually see their decision making is getting better.
Yeah.
Right. Because, or if they're making a hell of a lot of good decisions, but their skill execution is poor, then it just gives you a bit of a target to work on. The NFL's done some cool stuff. So collectively, they've done some cool stuff. They did a study where I think they went over 556,000 players. Imagine that. And they put a pressure rating on every play. So, and they determine pressure by time and left in game, scoreboard, where the team sat within the season, like quite a few good metrics that I thought was really, really good. And then, they were able to say, well, how does this team actually perform under pressure? Well, and so as a 1 would be first play of the season, a running play on the 25. Like there's no external pressure associated like with that. But a 5 would be, a couple of years ago, like Russell Wilson had to throw, a pass got intercepted, unfortunately, but Russell Wilson would throw a pass that got intercepted on the final play to win the Super Bowl or lose it. So that'd be a 5. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So like someone like Damian McKenzie, we can really easily go through his kicks like that, right? So a kick, first game of the season, out in front, 3 minutes into the game, that's a 1. But then like a couple of years ago, we won like 5 games in the last 5 minutes by less than 5 points. So they're all 5s, those kicks. So I think there's some real creative ways you can go about it, and then collectively can go, well, actually, are we getting better under pressure? So you think in a game like rugby, I reckon it's not that difficult. Like before and halftime, 10 minutes before halftime, 5 minutes after halftime. How do we play? How do we perform? Coming out of the sheds, how do we play? If we go out to a lead, like in New Zealand and Super Rugby this year, if you went out to a 14-point lead in the second half, about 70% of that time, that lead got reduced to 3 points.
Okay, so how can you deal with that?
Yeah, so we know waves are coming, like waves of pressure are going to come as the team that's now losing gets a little bit looser and we perhaps get a little bit tighter. So how do we manage that wave? And like to me, a mental growth of we now put teams away. Yeah, that would be sort of ways we can. And yes, can we look at that and go, yes, that's completely mental? No, of course we can't. But a sport like rugby, you can't say it's completely physical. You can't say it's completely skill based. It's a blend. So, you can't be absolutes about why teams win and don't win without considering both the objective factors, which might sit on a GPS, but the subjective factors, which might be things like the way that you mentally prepare or the way that you finish off games. They all have got to be blended into the same thing.
No, I'd agree. And it would be so easy just to ditch the mental side completely and focus solely on the technical, tactical, physical. Yeah. One other thing that springs to mind when you're talking there about creativity is mistakes. When individuals make mistakes, how do they then bounce back? Surely that's an important thing to be looking at as well.
I think, there's some really good research. Again, I'll see. I can't. I was just seeing if I could find it here. I can't. But there's some really good research around like mistakes made in the first few minutes of games, and then touches that player has throughout the game compared to a game where they didn't make mistakes. And we know there's a decrease, right? So we do know that, like something like the ability to recognize that I would potentially go into my shell underplay and be safe because of the fear that I have around underperforming. I've made a mistake. I don't want to make another one. But then again, we can look at that and go, okay, well, what is the environment doing to create that mindset? So are we actually allowing freedom in our players? Because I've been doing this for quite a while, mate, and I understand, which I really do understand at this point, is that you can have a coach that can stand in front of the room and say, I want you to be yourself, express yourself and be free. Then they walk in on Monday morning with 9 clips of mistakes. You're done. You're done. It's because no matter what you've said, your actions have said that there's high consequences to errors.
Yeah.
That's what they hear. They don't hear the 5 minutes on a Thursday you play free. They feel the shame of walking to your office on a Monday morning and you've got all the clips out. And then they go, well, what are we meant to do here? And I don't think any player's asking for no responsibility, no accountability. But what they're asking for is, I'm not a robot. I play in a really fast-paced game. It's evasive. The skill set's demanding. I'm not going to be perfect all the time. Is that okay?
So then surely the way the videos are used, performance analysis, that's got to be a massive factor in the mindset.
So I think about players when I'm talking, what are the two things that make you both nervous throughout the year? Number one is testing day, which is always really interesting, like a Bronco or a yo-yo, because you can't hide. The second thing would be review Mondays after they haven't performed well. Wondering whether they're going to get exposed in front of the team.
Yeah, that exposure in front of the team, must. Yeah, it's going to bring a range.
But what you might be able to help me here, mate. Why do coaches know this? Why do they still do it in the name of accountability? They know it causes shame and embarrassment. They know it causes our players to go into their shells. We know that they fear it and they have anxiety about it when they come into the building. Why do it?
Is that because the coach's focus is solely on results and outcomes as opposed to
I don't know.
the mindset? Because obviously, as you say, if you're trying to build a confident, fearless athlete, you're not going to do that by approaching it in that way.
And I suppose I was pretty lucky. I worked with a really awesome coach early in my career, actually in baseball. And he had a philosophy or a principle, which was praise in public, correct in private. And I really liked that. So he would do even if after a bad loss, he'd find two or three things, but any of the correction would be done in the office just with him and the player.
Makes sense, because you can have it, I suppose, like an intimate conversation, can't you? And understand maybe if there's something going on at home, and you can actually listen to the player, where you can't do that in a team environment. Or it's much more difficult anyway.
Well, let's be honest. Like, you're in 38 to 50 people in a room, and the coach stands up and asks the player, "What were you thinking here?" Like,
on that note, psychological safety is a big sort of buzzword these days. How do you see that evolving in elite professional sport? Because
I'm worried about its overemphasis.
Right.
I am. I think we have to have a cautious approach to it around the idea of we have to understand what environment we're operating in. I think it's like well-being. Like, you can't take the general principles of well-being that are applied to the public and apply them in a high-performance setting. It just can't. It's not that. It just doesn't. Like for example, like someone might say, good well-being is balance. I'm like, in a high-performance setting, good well-being is blending the demands that you have every day as an athlete, as a husband, as a father, and trying to blend them and make it work. There's no balance. There's only blending.
Yeah, and to some players, I suppose the blending or the balance would be where they do have other things, a lot of things going on outside the sport, but then to the next player, they're going all in on that sport.
Yeah, and like, there is and psychological safety, I think, is contextual. And this is like same with well-being is contextual. Like, I've got a colleague who is doing some awesome work about well-being in elite sports, and it's not around how do we take the four pillars that come on a Sunday morning when, the Q&A has a talk about well-being in the nation. We're talking about, it's highly demanding. We've signed up for that, right? We have signed up for that. So it requires an incredible amount of dedication. And we've all signed up for that. It's going to have a lot of ups and a lot of downs. We've all signed up for that. Does that make sense? Like, we've got to have all of those things in consideration. And then we go, here's what we do know. We know that psychological unsafety in any setting has a few parameters around it. Players shouldn't be abused. They should feel that the relationships that they can have be meaningful. They shouldn't wonder coming into the building how they will be treated physically, emotionally. I think that's a 101. But then if you put a microphone in our team room, you've been in teams, mate. If you put a microphone in that room or a microphone in a coach's office or put a microphone on a coach for the day and didn't understand the context, people would go, I can't believe that these are the conversations that have been had.
Yeah, yeah.
And they wouldn't make sense if you're not in that world. And I agree. So does that make any sense? I'm not trying to minimize the importance of psychological safety and well-being, but I don't think we can take a conversation that's happening in the public square and bring it into high performance sport and say we should have all the same application as that.
Yeah, I think as well in high performance sport, or certainly in a lot of sports, a lot of the guys in the changing rooms are in their late teens to early 20s, and with that come an awful lot of banter, doesn't it, and sledging and what.
Oh yeah, all of it, and like I think there is a worry, around, and even notice it with the teams that I work with, is that some of it's good. There needs to be a caution around certain subjects. Like, I think growing up in New Zealand, if you were in the rugby culture of 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was rife with racism. And it needs to stop. But, now in 2022, I'm glad that that's no longer the case, but you still see guys checking themselves around what they would consider a little bit of a giggle between mates and not quite knowing how that's now interpreted. And so I think you have to be much clearer around what safety means for the teams that you're working in with, because safety, for example, for the Royal New Zealand Ballet will be very different from the Chiefs. We'll have different demands, there'll be different issues, there'll be different contextual things that we've got to navigate through. All of that will take place. So and I guess the one thing that I always have wondered about where the wellbeing movement, particularly in sports, doesn't touch enough, I don't think, is the idea that one of the biggest enhancers of our well-being is overcoming difficulty. It enhances our well-being. Why are we trying to insulate people from difficulty?
And where's the balance sometimes between like well-being and performance anxiety? Sometimes that was me when you hear like some of the conversations that take place online.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. You have people that walk away from the game because they hate it. Like I've had a good close relationship the last number of years with Anton Leonard-Brown, and he's All Black centre, and he's been very open about 2016 emerging player of the year. Came and storming onto the international scene at the end of that season. He didn't want to be an All Black because of the anxiety and the pressure associated with that. So we do know that side of it's really, really real, and he managed to work through that and do some really good stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It's not, and that's why I get, like I had a good friend, Stephen Cottrell, did a report here in New Zealand called the Cottrell Report on Athletes' Rights and Welfare, and it's the most brilliant report and probably the best bit of work I've seen on it. And yet he admitted, hey, I'm struggling to actually define well-being in a behavioral way because it's so contextual. I guess that's our challenge, eh?
It is, yeah, and it'll be interesting to see where the research and where it all goes in the next 10 years or so. What would an average day look like to you then when you're working with the Chiefs?
So I live about an hour and 15 minutes from HQ. So they're in Hamilton and I live over on the coast because I don't want to live in Hamilton, which they'll all be mad about it. But Hamilton's like not my place. I love Hamilton for work, but not to live. And so I get over there. I would always have anywhere between 6 and 7 one-on-ones a day.
Okay.
Depending on the day, I'll do a team presentation normally. So I go in 2 days a week or 3 days a week from next year onwards. And, I will go in and I will do some meetings with the coaches. So a lot of it's actually done I suppose. So like if I'm coming in on a Monday, Sunday, I would have had an email out to the coach about my observations about where we're at, what could be key messages for the week around our psychological and mental and emotional states. Like, where are we at? What do we need to think about? Because you can get a feel pretty quickly after a loss or a win what might be the key messages this week. So we've already got that on the collective sense. I'll have my one-on-one work. I'll deliver probably something in the week. I'll do most of my work. So we do what we call them mind gyms. So we'll do them all through the preseason. So we'll do 6 or 7 45-minute sessions each week during the preseason around just different subjects related to what we're doing around the mind space. And then I'll do like a top-up Tuesday where I'll do a 5 to 7 minute pick out one of those things and remind us again.
Yeah.
And then most of it's then back to working with the guys individually. Then I'll go down and have some time with the medical team and just figure out where we are with our rehab guys. Spend some time with the physios, like what are our key sort of are we noticing anything? Are we picking up things? So my goal is to be as integrated as humanly possible.
Now, that's got to be the challenge as well, though, isn't it? Where
Yeah.
to be able to gain the trust of the player as well as the respect of the support staff and the coaching team, and where
and you don't always get that right. Like I've had times where I think I've been had a favorable player relationship and a not so favorable staff relationship, and I think probably that's part of my own immaturity when I was young in the work, just becoming a player coach sort of, and not recognizing I actually need to bring the staff with me for my work to be impactful. And probably the other times I've been more a coach's coach.
Yeah.
And then seen maybe potentially as a plant by the players, so I think the balance is good now because, listen, I've been there a while, and, the players, I have a good level of trust with the players, and, we've got some runs on the board as far as how we've performed, and we had to turn some really dark days around. And so once you have a few of those experiences with a team, I suppose that respect just grows organically. I respect everyone in that setup because I know we went through hell together. We lost 9 games post-COVID, and then we lost 2 games to start our 2021 season. 11 losses in a row was the most by a New Zealand team in Super Rugby history.
That would take some overcoming then.
Yeah. And we won the next 7 in a row and went to the final.
It's amazing how sport works.
And then we got third last year and lost in the semi-final. So we're on a good trajectory. So, but everybody who went through that time, I don't know, you just look at each other differently, eh? Like you go, oh yeah, we were in a pretty shit time together. It was rough.
In terms of building the mentally tough, resilient culture, what type of work do you get involved in that sense?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, I think resilience is such a overused but misunderstood term. So everybody wants to be resilient, but I don't think anybody really knows how to build resilience. Does that make sense? Like we talk a lot about how do we have resilient athletes. So I gather to take it back, like the number one thing we're trying to create in the environment, where I definitely am from a mindset perspective, particularly, is athlete ownership. So I think ownership creates resilience. I think when you own something and the people around you are there as resources and assets to support you, but it's your career, it's your development, I think you become naturally much more resilient rather than you're reliant on everybody else to take you where you may or may not know where you're going. And then so many players, you'll see this, will do a review and talk about, well, I didn't have support, I didn't have this, didn't have that. And I just go, what a load of bollocks. You guys have more than any other generation of professional athletes have had. What you need is ownership. And so I think ownership is the foundation for me of mentally resilient and mentally proficient players, because if you own, you mitigate victimhood and excuse making and that sort of stuff.
And I suppose that's the challenge, especially with the younger players, I would imagine, is actually helping them and help understand actually what ownership looks like and develop person.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of that work then becomes around the professional development of them as an athlete, not just outside of the park.
Yeah.
So, I think we've had a lot of focus on that the last, how do we make good professionals? And you have to marry that to how do we develop good people, of course, but you've got to actually identify what does a good professional do? And, and it's pretty basic. Like, yes, they don't know, but if I sat down with any of them, people go to me, oh, this mental stuff's so complicated. I'm like, rubbish. And I'm like, tell me a sport. Say, for example, mate, choose a sport. Just choose one out of your...
I'll go with golf since we're both golf.
Yep. So what does a mentally proficient golfer do well?
Oh, for one, he holds putts under pressure.
Yeah. So I mean, we could go through a list right now. You know what they do. There's no mystery. Yeah. The question is, how do we develop and train it? That's the bigger question. So same with professionalism. It's no mystery what good professionals do. So if I said to any of our young guys, hey, what does a good professional do? What does Brodie Retallick or Sam Cane do? They turn up early, they have good attention to detail, they have their weeks very well organized, they have structure around, they're more than happy to go and meet with coaches, they're always looking to get better. Okay, there's 5 things right there. There's a good professional.
Exactly.
Then we just help them embed those skills into their, or that sort of thinking into their mindset, so they become one of those people eventually.
Yeah, I suppose then it's an educational process, isn't it, over a period of time, and offering
education and with modeling, I reckon. Like, it's good. I'm a big believer in mentor systems within teams. So yes, it's good for me to say it. It's better for someone else to model it who they admire.
Yeah, massively. No, I totally get you there.
Yeah, and you don't have to formalize it. I think it actually happens much better organically. Like, I've tried being in teams where we'll have a buddy system, and I'm like, it worked for a week, and then it wasn't really that great. What was much better was the idea of, us allowing these relationships to form and encouraging our old guys to invest a little bit into the young guys, and maybe asking the young guys to be a bit more bolder.
Yeah. So I suppose working with a leadership group in that sense to try and bring the team along.
Yeah. But you can, I don't know about you with the teams you've worked with, I can walk into a teammate and I can tell you within about an hour of our young guys who already have that in them. You can see it. They're hungry. They ask questions. They're just into everything. And you're like, okay, I'll just have to give them a little bit of direction, but they're good. Now, the other ones who are sitting in the back won't say a word, who are shy and quiet, we need to help them.
Yeah, massively. As you say, you can spot it a mile away, can't you? That's was that confident person who's going to get involved in questions. And there's so many people out there who, they want to ask the question, don't they? But they're just too frightened. Yeah,
and I've sort of had a own personal philosophy in engaging with teams. I just sort of have approached it through just the idea of feed the hungry. And I'll stand in front of the team at the start of the year saying, I'm not chasing you for one-on-ones. I'm not going to write you 98 WhatsApp messages and say, can we catch up? This is your career. If you want to engage with me, I'll give you everything I've got 100%, but I'm not forcing you to.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that. Because I want to spend time feeding the hungry, not trying to create appetite in those that have malnutrition.
I like that. I like the way you've summarized that. But it's fair though, isn't it? When you're doing what psychological skills work, trying to build mentality, it's got to come from them ultimately, hasn't it?
Got 45 guys in the building, 35 to 45 athletes, and I'm in there 10 to 15 hours a week. I can't get to everyone.
No. And I'd imagine those days when you are seeing 6 and 7, you'll be able to sleep well there on the evening.
Oh yeah, like I'll have days where I'll turn up and I've got 15 on my list that, okay, we're just going to make this work.
Yeah.
And that's where we sort of got the idea with the performance director. I just need some more time because I can't meet the demands currently. So, which is, I think, is a good thing, eh? Like better than sitting there in your office going, what am I doing all day?
Massively. So, in terms of like wrapping this up, are you able to give 3 key takeaways, maybe for coaches, in terms of, how this all works, how we develop mental toughness and obviously integrate mental skills into elite sport better?
Yeah, I'd probably would be 3 things. That top of my head would be, number one, they don't learn like you did. So that's the number one thing coaches need to understand. So they don't learn the way you did. So their learning will be very, very different. You got to be flexible as a coach. They don't have to be flexible as a learner.
Yeah. So they've all got different learning styles.
Yeah. And even the idea around how, some learn through experience, for example, not even like the style of learning, like the journey of learning. Like some learn quickly and apply quickly, but don't own it deep enough and it collapses under pressure. Others are slow burners, but through experience, they begin to own something. So, not just about the style of learning, but I think the journey of learning is everyone's a little bit different. The second thing is that you have to earn the right to be honest with athletes. And I think, the analogy I use is you've got to build a bridge of trust to drive over a truck of honesty. And if you don't care for your players in this generation, you will have no impact in what they're doing. So, my model of it, a very simple model, is create connection, in order to earn trust so I can have impact. There's no impact without connection. That's like, who are you? Where's your family from? And I've been around coaches. I remember one cricket coach I worked with, they would retweet everything about how much he cared and da-da-da. And I said, how much do you know about the life of your players? None. It was an idea, but it wasn't a reality. And then I think the final thing, which I think coaches have got to understand, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, is players are not going to sacrifice. No, let me put it this way. Here's a better way of putting it. Players will choose their experience in the environment over loyalty to a club or a jersey. And that's changed.
Yeah.
And you got to realize that. So meaning, like, I grew up in Celtic Rugby Club. I probably had some of the worst coaches in history, like you would have growing up. I had no option of leaving Celtic Rugby Club. You're there till you die.
Yeah.
Regardless of, but players will go, if I am not I'm not enjoying it here, if the environment's rubbish, if it's a bit toxic, you can't hold out this thing called loyalty to a jersey and expect me to stay. I'm out. So, like, that trump card of jersey loyalty has now been replaced by experience in the environment. And a coach has got to recognize that.
Yeah. And essentially, whether it's the ownership, the powers that be higher up, and the coaches, they can all do something about the environment and the culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've had players that have come into and become chiefs, and part of their reasoning of the chiefs is, we heard it's a good environment here. Like, and then, like, I've probably been parts of teams that haven't been great, where players have left and go, it's just toxic here.
Yeah, I mean, why would you sign for a club where there's a toxic environment? That would be the question I would always throw at a player.
Sometimes a club's really good at hiding it.
True.
And the player's got to be better at their due diligence. Like, if you talk to a player when there's no cameras and da-da-da, and you're sitting down having a coffee, they know what's happening in the environment. That's why I think coaches and leaders and support staff underestimate. Our players are normally typically really, really smart. They're really intuitive, and they normally have a really good understanding of what's happening in the environment.
Yeah, some really interesting insights there, Aaron.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, I'm a little unconventional, so I don't come from a, traditional background, but I think it's helped me because I just probably look at things through a different sort of lens. So it's sort of that marriage of, psychology with a bit of, I suppose, that social skills, of knowing people / performance knowledge. So that's sort of where it sort of probably combines for me, which is, I'm probably a little bit of a mongrel in that regard. I've just taken a little bit from all of my experiences and combined them, which hopefully makes my perspective a little bit more holistic for people at times.
Yeah, and that's what shapes your practice and your philosophy at the end of the day. No, it's been great.
Yeah.
The listeners an awful lot out of the conversation. Where can they find you if they want to reach out to you?
I'm not really great on the proper socials, but I do heaps on LinkedIn and heaps on Twitter. Yeah. Like, socials to me is not about, I went to this and did this. I just enjoy it to learn. Yeah. I'm pretty obsessive learner. Like, I love learning. I love reading. I had a conversation with someone earlier today that's in New Jersey, and they said two things that have gone straight into my notebook. I was like, that's gold. I'm going to use that. That's superb. Like those, that's the stuff I love.
Yeah.
But also, I suppose it's a good analogy for anyone listening. I think really good. Like, in modern age, I just call it the magpie trap. And so I grew up in this place in New Zealand called Hawke's Bay. It's a beautiful place, lots of incredibly good wine, and really fertile, beautiful climate. I used to ride my bike, and these damn magpies used to go after me on my bike. And I come to find out that magpies like shiny things, and they take them back to their nest. And I reckon the magpie danger for us is we have so much good information out there. And I think a lot of people collect it, and they take all these shiny things to their nest, and they never use it. Mm. So I really am committed to going, yes, I want to be a great learner, but I want to be a better practitioner. And that's sort of my goal.
Yeah, and that's the danger, isn't it? Where, as you say, there's so much.
There's so much information. It's good stuff too everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you've got to actually take it and do something with it. That's the key.
Yeah.
Well,
it is indeed.
A big thank you for your time.
Oh, you're welcome, mate.
I realise it's pretty late for yourself. You'll be off to bed.
Not too bad. Shortly. But nah, it's great. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you. Aaron mentioned his love of learning. I love learning too. I'm always open to different ideas and concepts. Now, the field of sports psychology is a bit of an unknown for some people. So I just want to point you to my website. So our website is the 3ws.sport-excellence.co.uk. Under the resources section of the website is a library where you're going to find a range of information from blogs to podcasts to videos on sports such as rugby. You've got soccer, you've got golf, you've got cricket. There's a host of information there on different sports and essentially different tips and bits of advice to help people overcome different challenges and hurdles. So please do take a look. Also, have a fantastic week, and I look forward to sharing another positive interview next week. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.